What's good, DMV Sports Zone? It's Noah. Another week, another fantasy preview for the Washington Wizards and the Washington Capitals. Really interesting. I know, especially for the Capitals, I've talked a lot about Ilya Samsonov versus Vida Vanacek and the young goaltending battle. But now we have a Hershey Bear, Zach Fucale, coming in with a little bit of a wild card. And I want to talk about that. Before we get started, again, all my fantasy sports analytics information comes from Sport AI. The app is now, as I said, public in test flight. Got a lot of users on there right now. So it's really exciting to see all the new updates and feedback that we've been getting. And I hope that these videos have been informational for the people that enjoy them. Without further ado, let's get started.
Welcome back to DMV Sports Zone.
Chased down by Beal in the corner for three, gets fouled and hits.
Welcome to DC.
Well, they tied him out.
You know when you're at the USA Cup, you're taking it slightly. I'm taking it slightly. Now how you gon' act when we gon' be right back? When we gon' be right here, we gon' be right here. We ain't going nowhere. Welcome to DC. DC, the home of Chuck Brown. Oh, you don't know the sound? Well, let me break it down.
So as I mentioned before, I think the primary talk this week has to be the Washington Capitals. Yes, they've continued their success. So in terms of a week to week, has there been a slump? No, there hasn't. You know, your standard players are still doing really well, like I was talking about last week. Ovechkin is the ageless wonder, still arguably the best fantasy forward in fantasy. John Carlson starting to come back slowly as well. I think a lot of people were talking about how Backstrom and Carlson were having a slow start to the season. Those concerns should be put to rest. People forget, this is an 82-game season. We're not in a COVID-shortened season anymore. And unlike in football, you can be more patient with slow starts, especially with players like Backstrom and Carlson, who can be key to your fantasy sports or fantasy hockey championships later down the road. So while they are pretty stable, the goaltending remains to be a question. Vanacek and Samsonov, Vanacek is the preferred starter as I predicted for the past 2-3 weeks. But now we got a wild card. Zach Fucale, a former early second-round pick by the Montreal Canadiens, made his first NHL start, last week. And, man, what a performance. A shutout in his first game. Then now a lot of people are saying, how does he fit into things? Yes, he was sent down to the minors once Vanacek comes back. But where does he play? I mean, he's technically, still pretty young, especially for a goaltender, as they take a long time to develop. What do we do now? We got Fucale, we have Samsonov, and we have Vanacek. It's eerily similar to when we had the whole situation almost identical, where we had a Czech, Mikhail Neuwirth. We had a young, relatively unproven minor Canadian goalie, Holtby. And then we had our top Russian pick, Varlamov. And we saw how it turned out. Holtby ended up being the winner, ended up winning a Stanley Cup, ended up being one of the best goaltenders we've ever seen for this franchise. So the parallels are there, but I can tell you right now, as of now, Vanacek and Samsonov still are the goalies to look for. We've already invested a second-round draft pick to bring Vanacek back from the Seattle Kraken. Samsonov being our first-round pick. The draft capital is too high to really consider Fucale, at least for this season. The next couple of years, we never know, but fantasy is even though you want to look in the long term, is a day-by-day, week-by-week, season-by-season outlook. So I wouldn't be too concerned with Fucale. I would still focus on, is Vanacek or Samsonov going to be the long-term starter? Again, Vanacek, like I predicted, is getting a bigger and bigger edge, despite Samsonov having some decent performances. So if you're still, stuck in that goalie proposition, it may be time to drop Samsonov. If you're going to pick between the two, keep Vanacek, drop Samsonov, because there are other really good even backups that are playing more and more that are worth picking up on the waiver wire. It's no longer worth keeping Samsonov. I know Vanacek had that undisclosed injury, but nothing indicates that it will be long term. And as a result, Samsonov will also probably be safe to remain on the waiver wire for the event you ever need to pick him back up. So that really makes sense there. So all in all, in summary, Vocali is good. It's funny because he was considered a bust by the Canadiens organization, but he showed he was a solid goaltender. He'll get his chance to continue to play for the Hershey Bears. Next season, who knows? But Vanacek is the one you want to prioritize right now. Samsonov is waiver wire droppable now. And of course, the forwards that I mentioned before all have been picked up. Really doubt any of them are remaining. In terms of defense, Nicholas Jensen, still a valuable waiver wire pickup if you want to add him. He's very consistent among defenders, especially. You want consistency. Not very many top-heavy players, but you want a consistent player. Nicholas Jensen, I think, is the only guy. Maybe Orlov that would still be sitting on your waiver wire. So maybe drop Samsonov, add up a Jensen or Orlov. So, outlook for the Capitals, looking great. Now I want to talk briefly about the Wizards. Very similar situation to last week and 2 weeks before. Nothing much has changed in terms of fantasy perspective. The Dinwiddie and Harrell takes have aged fantastically. Dinwiddie is, crazily enough, almost averaged 4 double-doubles in a row. Last night in a big comeback win against the Pelicans, almost got another double-double, this time with assists. But that well-rounded contribution makes him a draft steal. Highly doubt that he's on any waiver wires, even in an 8-team league. So whoever picked up Dinwiddie, good for you. You got one of the best sleepers in the draft. Harrell's doing well. Kuzma as well. In terms of any other players that have been rising up the ranks, the Wizards, nothing much to change with them. The only thing to continue to keep an eye on is how do they handle the Rui Hachimura, Thomas Bryant situation. So Bryant is supposed to come back in December, but there are a lot of rumors that he will be traded, which makes sense. There's not a lot of room for him to play. With Harrell and Gafford, he really doesn't have the ability to move to even the 4. You have Kuzma and Hachimura and Bertans. So there's a lot of rumors that he's going to be traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Is a rumor team, the Miami Heat. So Thomas Bryant's outlook as a Wizard isn't looking that great. He's still a great energy guy. Ironically, very similar to Harrell. But his outlook for the season is not looking good because, first of all, he's coming back in mid-December. Second of all, even if he does come back, very limited playing time. They're actively looking to trade him. So keep an eye on that. And then Rui Hachimura, a lot of people are asking, he doesn't have a specific injury. He's just been working his way back into the lineup. They're taking it very slow. The Wizards are the best team in the East, one of the best teams in the league right now. So they have no reason to change their chemistry and change their lineups right now. But when Rui Hachimura comes back, it looks more and more likely he'll be a 6-man off the bench or 7th man off the bench, or rotating in with Kuzma depending on the matchup. So his fantasy stock, unfortunately, has plummeted tremendously until further notice, or until an injury to Kuzma or one of the other forwards, or a downturn performance. Hachimura might not be worth an IR stash at this point, considering there are other players like Brooks just coming back from IR, Dante DiVincenzo, Victor Oladipo. Similar situations where their teams are playing pretty well, so they're not rushing them back. But when they return, they have very little competition. In the case of DiVincenzo, they only have to worry about Grayson Allen, who is playing well, Jordan Nwora, Middleton. Well, Middleton's obviously expected, but Pat Connaughton. But he has a clear role as a starter or at minimum a high-minute bench player. And the same can be said about Victor Oladipo. He only has to worry about pretty much Tyler Hero. I mean, they're playing Gabe Vincent and Casey Okpala right now, who are usually bench players. So there's a clear path to fantasy relevancy for them. Hachimura, not the case. So, if you want to stash him, go ahead if you're in a deep league. But the reality is this, Hachimura's draft stock falls tremendously because he's not a player that gets a lot of other counting stats. He's an average mediocre rebounder at the 4 position. He's a decent scorer, very little turnovers, but he also doesn't get that many steals, doesn't get that many assists. So is he worth stashing? I don't think so. you have the opportunity, I think, to just kind of see when he comes back, see if he plays well, and then pick him up from there. So I wouldn't waste an IR spot on him. So all in all, yeah, not much has changed, but the outlook unfortunately has downgraded for a lot of players. And it looks like the goaltending battle is nearing its conclusion. Samsonov is waiver wire droppable. Hachimura not worth an IR stash at this point. The good players that we were talking about before, their high score pluses and their analytics continue to check out. They continue to actually exceed expectations. So for the Wizards, Dinwiddie, Harrell, Kuzma, Gafford, obviously those players that may have been on waiver wires, but now are definitely not on a waiver wire anymore. But for the Capitals, you still have Nicholas Jensen. You still have Dmitry Orlov. Really should pay attention to them. I would really suggest picking up one of the two if you need more consistent scoring from the blue line. And then do not worry about Zach Fucale unless a major injury happens. Not going to be fantasy relevant for the rest of this year. Again, this is Noah, and I really hope that you enjoy these types of videos. Really excited to talk on Thursday about the Washington football team and the Ravens, especially after the upset. But I'll stop here, let you enjoy your Wizards and Capitals news, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.